Okay, so I just wanted to share some of my thoughts about this novel, since I would normally be able to do this with you guys, but it's weird to just have the discussion boards and not face to face. So just some things to note from each chapter. So I'll do this for 1 through 3, and then I'll do it for 4, 5, and 6. Maybe 4, 5, and then save 6. I don't know. We'll see. But chapter 1, so looking over your color-coded analyses, a lot of you picked up on the theme of friendship, and that is absolutely a huge theme. Their relationship is interesting, that's for sure, with George being a bit of a jerk. And Lenny, obviously pulling at the heartstrings, just that whole relationship. You have to have some empathy for both of them, both George and Lenny, because even though George loses his temper really easily and gets frustrated, he's still caring for Lenny. He could have absolutely just sort of left him and said, I'm out, see you later. So obviously there are some redeeming qualities in George, but he is sort of hard to like. I guess that would be his only redeeming quality, is that he takes care of Lenny. I told you guys that my favorite scene is the ketchup scene, where Lenny, again, it illustrates a couple of things. It illustrates that Lenny, first of all, doesn't even realize what's going on. And then George it also illustrates how quick-tempered George is, but at the very end of that, it shows how much Lenny loves George, because he says, even if we had ketchup, I'd leave it all for you. I wouldn't take any of it. And of course, this is after George lights him up and, flips out on him, but still, that is just the relationship there. There is obviously love going both ways, and they just show it in completely different ways. So they obviously care about each other, and their relationship is unique. Remember the time period, we're in the Great Depression. So it was not normal for these migrant workers to travel together, and you see this in chapter 2 when they get a lot of sort of suspicion. People are very sus as to why they're traveling together, because that's not normal. Because if you figure you're trying to get a job, the less competition, the better. So the fact that they go together is interesting, and again, just illustrates that they truly do care about each other and are friends, even though they're vastly different. So the other thing from chapter 1 that a lot of you picked up on, so John Steinbeck, some people love him, some of you do not, but Steinbeck is a wordsmith, and his language is really pretty. The imagery in chapter 1, the opening, the describing of the setting, I think he does a good job with that. Now, people are quick to hate on him, some of you. So even if you think that this is, a very easy, simple story to read, now remember, he was trying to sell some books, so we said this about Hawthorne, he's going to try to sell books, so he's going to try to make it appealing to the masses. So if you think his descriptions are too much, but I do think he does a really nice job with his writing in general. And then the metaphors, a lot of you picked up on the fact that Lenny is compared to animals. We'll talk about the effect that has a little bit later in the chapters. So that's my summary for chapter 1, and I think the things that I'd like you to pick up on. I'll be back for chapter 2. Okay, chapter 2, not a lot happens. It does, however, it's an important chapter because it establishes the setting and the environment that the rest of the novel is going to play out in. So we already had some foreshadowing in chapter 1, and also I showed you guys where Steinbeck got the title from, and we know that the theme of that poem was about plans going awry. And we do know that Lenny and George have a plan, or some of you refer to it as a dream. Absolutely an American dream. They want to own their own place. So they have to work. The ranch sort of adds a little bit more of an ominous, element to the story, because it doesn't really seem in chapter 2 like it is going to be good news for anybody. The people there, at the very end of the chapter, Lenny says, I don't like it here. You can obviously, the foreshadowing is punching us in the face. But important things in chapter 2, it introduces us to a lot of characters. So you meet Candy, the old man, you meet Candy's dog, you meet the boss who wears boots with spurs to prove he's not a working man, so you get a little bit of arrogance from him. You meet the boss's son Curly, who is arrogant as well and has what we call the Napoleon complex, which is like a tiny little man feels like he has to make up for what he lacks in size by being like a huge douchebag. So you absolutely get that vibe. Again, foreshadowing. And you get introduced to, very briefly, Curly's wife. By this point, you guys have read enough to know that Curly's wife is Curly's wife, and she won't get a name for the rest of the book. So I think that says something about Steinbeck and the time period as well.
So can we talk for one hot second about the ridiculousness of Curly? But obviously we need sort of a bad guy. The problem with this book is you can't really tell who's a bad guy yet, but Curly is absolutely going to be the aggressor. I mean, he is just a douche, and we know from hearsay that he doesn't like big guys, and we know that Lenny is a big guy. So you can already foreshadow that something is going to happen. And the fact that Curly's wife doesn't have a name, are you kidding me? I mean, granted, Steinbeck wrote this book in the 1930s, and therefore, ridiculous, but it proves a point about women, about how women were viewed, especially Curly's wife is the only woman on this ranch, and she's married to Curly, who's a douche canoe. So, I don't know, hot take, I have sympathy for her. You might not agree with me.
Okay, chapter 3 is the richest chapter in this novel. So it has introduction, I guess a more formal introduction to Slim, who is very well respected on the ranch. That upsets Curly because Curly thinks that he should just automatically get that respect, whereas Slim has earned it. So of course Curly has issue with Slim. We see how that plays out. We also meet Carlson and his lack of empathy. Carlson is the personification of lack of empathy, like not caring about other people's feelings. And you see that with Candy's dog and how he handles that situation. Candy's dog, there is a deeper meaning there. Candy says it himself. He draws a correlation between himself, an old, handless, kind of useless person, and his dog, who was seen as old and useless. And he's like, oh my gosh. And he has this like, so Candy has this, epiphany that the dog is me, I am the dog. The other important thing to note about the dog, Candy again says it himself, I ought to have shot that dog myself, George. I shouldn't have let no stranger shoot my dog. So this speaks to taking responsibility for your own actions and your own stuff. So Candy feels really bad because that was his dog. He should have been the one to kill it. Even though he didn't want to, it was his responsibility. Hang on to that thought as we finish the novel. There's going to be a correlating scene that goes right with taking responsibility for your own stuff, for lack of a better term. So chapter 3 ends with something interesting happening with George and Lenny's dream. Everybody goes out to see if Curly's gonna like fight Slim or whatever, because Curly's, And so this part of the novel, gets me every time. So Candy is obviously like upset and crying, and it's just George and Lenny and like a sad Candy. George and Lenny start talking about their dream, and they forget that Candy's there. So Candy, of course, is devastated. He's like crying on his bunk, and then he hears them talking about this ranch, and he butts in. And at first, George is like, AB conversation, see your way out. And then Candy's like, well, hey, I have some money saved up. They gave me a settlement when my hand got chopped off, so like I can contribute. And then George is like, oh, on second thought, like, come on in here, we're all in. So they have this like awesome plan. It gets like this super high happiness where they're like, we're gonna do it. Lenny starts thinking about all the rabbits that he's going to tend, and he's just sitting there like happy and smiling and imagining himself surrounded by. And so at this point, everybody runs back into the bunkhouse because Curly is too much of a pansy to actually fight Slim because he's actually scared of Slim. So they all come in, all the men are like making fun of Curly and like sort of like razzing him a little bit. And so he feels probably backed into a corner. I mean, anybody would, but he's a significant douchebag, so obviously his ego is huge. So as he's feeling like everybody's against him, he scans the room and he looks at Lenny, who is literally sitting there unaware of what's happening. And Lenny's probably just like, again, in his head, tossing bunnies and like rolling around in a field of bunnies. So Lenny has a smile on his face, and that upsets Curly, and Curly uses that as the excuse to like go after Lenny, and that's when the worst fight scene ever occurs.
And I can't really talk about it without this stupid filter on because this part makes me really sad. I always picture Lenny, I feel like I've said this, but Rowan's now becoming too smart, but I always say he has like the intelligence of like a 4 or 5 year old. So he doesn't understand why Curly's punching him in the face, and he's just like, make it stop, make it stop. That image in my head makes me cry. And then George is like, you know what, get him. And Lenny smashes Curly's hand, and good for Lenny. But what's kind of my favorite part about this is that Slim tells Curly, you got your hand caught in a machine, because obviously if Curly told his dad that Lenny smashed his hand, that would get Lenny and George fired. And Curly's pride is what makes him agree with that. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell anybody I got my butt kicked by that big dummy. So that's kind of a nice little twist, using Curly's pride sort of against him. But that's...
And so chapter 3 leaves us off with the image of George cleaning up Lenny's face, and Lenny like crying and saying that he didn't mean to hurt Curly. And he asks if he can still tend the rabbits, and you're like, knife through the heart. Thank you, John Steinbeck. Like, the man makes you feel something. Love him or hate him, he does have a way to kind of make you empathize with these characters specifically. So that was the big excitement of chapter 3. It checked off all the boxes for me that make me cry. Sad grandpa, dead dog, old or large people who are dumb and sad. So I hope you're enjoying the novel, or at least can find something to appreciate about it. I will talk to you guys later.